Subject Linguistics, Course Title Pragmatics and Discourse Analysis, Module 25, Sinclair and Coulthard's Model and Related Studies. Writer and presenter Rajneesh Arora. In the last module, we discussed Birmingham model of discourse analysis that was developed by John Sinclair and Malcolm Coulthard in 1975. In this module, we will discuss some important studies which are based on Sinclair and Coulthard's approach, such as Burton 1990, Coulthard et al. 1981, Riley 1985, Francis and Hunston 1992, and M22 1994. Let's begin with Burton's model of discourse analysis. Burton attempts to modify the original Sinclair and Coulthard's approach for the purpose of applying it to any naturally occurring talk. She makes modifications at all the three levels. At the level of move, she notices that follow-up or feedback occurs very rarely in naturally occurring conversations, so she decides to do away with the third column, that is follow-up move. The biggest difference between classroom data and everyday talk, as she puts it, is the wide range of verbal activities available to anyone answering an opening. If the data is to be analyzed using opening and answering moves only, it has to be forced into the categories that they do not really fit. For Burton, once an initiation is made, it can either be supported or challenged. Based on this idea, she introduces two moves which she labels supporting and challenging moves. She then introduces the concept of discourse framework, among other things. Discourse framework concerns the presuppositions set up in the initiating move of the exchange, that is, in any move other than a supporting move, and the interactional expectations dependent on that move. In Burton's analysis, an exchange lasts as long as the framework holds, whereas a supporting move is any move that maintains the framework set up by a preceding initiatory move. Challenging moves function to hold up the progress of that topic or topic introduction in some way. At the level of acts, she drops certain acts which are classroom specific and introduces certain acts like summons, accusation, excuse, preface, etc., which would cover a range of naturally occurring talk. Burton then applies the framework to the first 10 transactions of Pinter's The Dumb Waiter. She is aware that she is coding only one interpretation of the text, as she does not have intonational evidence which may resolve certain ambiguities of the text. Recognizing the complexity of conversation and especially the complex channels of interaction of dramatic discourse, she explicitly states that I want to focus entirely on what can be said about channels of interaction within a theater building and during a performance. I'm here leaving aside all ideas about the author, editor, or producer, or any other background figure, and I'm concentrating on what happens when an utterance is produced by a character on the stage and is heard both by other characters and the audience simultaneously. For clearly, while stage talk shares certain characteristics with real talk, there is one absolutely fundamental difference in that stage talk is routinely produced to be overheard by a party not usually involved in that discourse in the microcosm. This is Burton for you. Let's move on to exchange structure of 4 different discourse types. Coulthard et al. 1981 attempt to develop descriptions of doctor-patient interviews, committee meetings, broadcast discussions, and lecture monologues. They expected that doctor-patient interviews would be structurally closest to the classroom interaction. In both, one dominant speaker has the control over topic. The committee meetings would have different discourse structures where participants are generally of equal status and one person has a general control over topic. Their expectations were reflected in their analysis of exchange structures of these different types of discourse. Accordingly, the modified exchange structure for the doctor-patient interview theoretically allowed an infinite repetition of the feedback component. The longest structure that occurred in the doctor-patient discourse was IRFFF, that is, an initiation by the doctor, a response by the patient, followed by 3 feedbacks. In the analysis of committee meetings, the analysis revealed structures like IFFF, that is, initiation followed by feedback in terms of acknowledge, accept, and endorse. As the most common type of exchange pattern was IFN. Feedback was generally seen as a supporting move following an initiation. Here, N stands for a feedback that may occur an indefinite number of times. For the broadcast discussions, the exchange structure was the simplest, that is, forming exchanges with initiating moves with no verbalized response or feedback. Unlike doctor-patient interaction, therefore, the analysis of broadcast discussions did not yield much at exchange rank. In a desperate bid, they looked at the cohesive features in order to find links between utterances and found the following items useful for their analysis. Number 1, lexico-referential cohesion, that is, looking at repetition of words or phrases. Number 2, synonyms, antonyms, hyponyms, and words from the same semantic field. Number 3, anaphora. Number 4, ellipsis and expansion. Number 5, sentence continuations and completions. Number 6, parallelism of syntax and intonation. Number 7, logical connectors. For the analysis of lecture monologues, they proposed 3 units: transaction, sequence, and member. Transaction, like the classroom discourse, was marked by the focusing activity at the boundaries. For example, right? So let's turn to mathematics for the next 45 minutes. Soon they realized that it was not fruitful to analyze monologues at the level of exchange rank, because genuine interaction does not occur in lecture monologues, though it is theoretically possible to characterize the audience responses in terms of nods, smiles, even murmurs of agreement or indications of disagreements or puzzlement, especially when the speaker is particularly looking for it. It would be fruitful, they felt, perhaps to look at the speaker's monologue as a long turn, roughly equivalent to act in multi-party discourse, which they labeled member. They divided the discourse into main and subsidiary, keeping the first opening member into the main and the second as subsidiary to the first. They illustrated it with an extended example, which you may see in Coulthard et al. 1981. Accordingly, the main discourse had a sequence of informing members showing three kinds of relationships: additive, adversative, and causal, marked by conjunctions and, but, and so, respectively. In the subsidiary discourse, there were two main classes of subsidiary members: glosses and asides. Glosses having a closer dependency relationship to main discourse than asides. They discovered three types of glosses that they called restate, qualify, and comment on the basis of their functions in discourse. The description of these different types of discourse types gives us useful insights into their structures. In the analysis of drama, we do not require a separate framework for the analysis of monologue. The framework for the analysis of dialogue will be applicable to the analysis of monologue as well. Let's move on to Riley's study of level of coherence. Philip Riley attempts an analysis of a passage of classroom interaction in terms of levels of coherence in discourse. He illustrates the levels of coherence in terms of interaction, realization, elocution, and propositional content. Interaction takes place when the turn allocation is strictly followed. Realization refers to the set of message bearing elements that may be verbal, paralinguistic, non-verbal in a situation. As we have learnt in speech act theory, that propositional content of an utterance may be very different from the elocution it may make. Riley argues that by making a distinction between interaction, elocution, content, and realization, we can show a given communicative act may be acceptable at one or more of these levels, but not at others. By pinpointing why and how an utterance is unacceptable, the degree to which it is deviant, Riley says the linguist is once again back in business as a discourse analyst. He uses the following example to make his point. When A says, "What's the time?" B may respond in any of the following ways. B. 1. 6:30. 2. I like fish and chips. 3. Why? 4. Nurdle, nurdle. 5. This is a case where no reply comes. 6. 6:30. But in this case, it's not B, but C answers. A's elicitation is clearly a request for information. 1 to 4 are different possibilities of reply to A's elicitation. 5 is a case where B does not reply at all. 6 is a possibility where C gives the reply and not B. Riley wants to point out that 1 is coherent at all the 4 levels, whereas 2 is coherent in terms of interaction, realization, and elocution, but not at the level of propositional content. 3 is coherent at the level of interaction and realization, but does not satisfy the elocution and content criteria because the illocutionary adjacency pair is interrupted. In 4, only the interaction criteria is valid and is therefore incoherent at the other levels. 5 is a case in which interaction does not take place at all, which makes it incoherent at all levels. 6 is a case of interruption by C, but clearly it is coherent at the levels other than interaction. In his analysis of classroom discourse, he suggests 3 kinds of structures: return, involvement, and encounter. Return is the minimal structure with an opening by the speaker, followed by a reply or a number of replies by the addressee and an optional closing. That means O plus RN plus C. Involvement is the intermediate structure, the end of which is marked by a change of speaker, and encounter is the maximal structure. Within their analysis of classroom discourse, using this criteria, Riley attempts to apply the Sinclair and Coulthard system of analysis to one return in order to show that even though there is no one-to-one correspondence between their units of illocutionary structure, that is act, move, exchange, transaction and interaction, and their units of interactional structure, for example turn, return, involvement and encounter, the 2 analyses are compatible. Let's move on now to Francis and Hunston's framework. There's yet another framework proposed by Gill Francis and Susan Hunston for the analysis of everyday conversation, which is based on Sinclair and Coulthard model. The model seeks to interpret, integrate and systematize the various adaptations and refinements of the original Sinclair-Coulthard model. Francis and Hunston attempt to analyze a telephonic conversation between 2 native speakers of English. They begin with a revised version of the notion of exchange suggested by Coulthard and Montgomery, which incorporates an additional element of structure, that is RI, making it RI-RFN. Like other researchers who attempted to modify the framework to suit everyday conversation, they drop certain classroom specific acts and include certain other acts which would be useful for the analysis of telephonic conversation, for example terminate, receive and react, realized by low, mid and high key respectively. Certain other acts which did not occur in their data are also included, the acts which they thought could potentially occur in everyday conversation, including telephonic talk. The acts like acquiesce, neutral proposal, marked proposal, return, conquer, reject, receive, behave, engage are introduced among other modified acts, raising the number to 32 from 22 in Sinclair and Coulthard. The framework suggests 8 moves: framing, opening, answering, eliciting, informing, acknowledging, directing and behaving, of which first 3 are organizational and the rest are conversational. They then discuss the problems of double coding, exemplifying various possibilities. For example, a move which is coded as acknowledge under feedback of one exchange can be at the same time an informing move under initiation of the next exchange. Francis and Hunston also bring in the discussion of incomplete exchanges, the exchanges where a predicted element of an exchange is not present. Their coding of an utterance hello in the middle of the telephone conversation as greet and their labeling the exchange incomplete sound problematic. We may argue that in a telephonic conversation, an utterance like hello occurring in the middle of a conversation is used to get the attention of the other person or to see whether the other person is listening or not. It cannot be coded as greet, which can occur only at the boundaries. The exchange 6a as an example of greet incomplete, therefore, is not appropriate. The framework by Francis and Hunston, however, is comprehensive and captures the finer points of the analysis without disturbing the basic theoretical principles of Sinclair and Coulthard. Let's now move on to Suez Framework. M22 presents a framework for the analysis of naturally occurring spoken discourse. She rejects an adjacency pair or a two-part exchange as a unit of conversational organization, as it fails to account for some conversational data. She proposes a three-part exchange which is more powerful as well as theoretically motivated. She also points out that conversation is a cooperative effort between participants and that an addressee can always retrospectively classify the function of an utterance. To illustrate her point, she gives the following example borrowed from Lubbock and Fenchel. A. Would you mind taking the dust rag and dust around? B. No. He doesn't move. Sui, 1994. Here, B deliberately misinterprets A's request. In other words, B retrospectively classifies A's request as elicitation. We may point out here that this is also a strategy used by B to reduce the face threatening effect of A's request. A similar strategy can be seen in the following example. A. Are you crazy? B. Yes, I am. Here, both A and B know that it is an insult. B deliberately, retrospectively classifies it as an elicitation, thereby reducing it to a mere question, mitigating in the process the effect of the face-threatening act. The strength of Thui's work lies in her incorporating a wide range of speech acts. Sinclair and Coulthard, 1975, in their analysis of classroom interaction, or Burton, 1981, in her analysis of casual conversation, use a single act reply as a response to elicitation. Sui, on the other hand, makes a distinction between different kinds of reply in terms of following pairs: illicit inform, illicit confirm, illicit agree, and illicit commit. In other words, she has a richer taxonomy of speech acts and discourse acts. Secondly, she employs the notion of discourse maintenance, which deals with turn-taking system. After a speaker has produced an elicitation, for example, the addressee has the choice of maintaining or not maintaining the discourse framework. Not maintaining the discourse framework would involve, for example, challenging the presuppositions of the elicitation reply. Thirdly, in her analysis of description, she brings in the linguistic theory of politeness. Her analysis in this way offers many useful insights into the nature of naturally occurring conversation. Now go through this animation and try to see what's happening. The angry father says, "Is that your coat lying on the floor?" Son replies, "Yes, it is," but doesn't move. In this illustration, based on an example given by Sinclair and Coulthard, we can see that the father's command to pick up the coat is reduced to a mere question by a verbal and non-verbal response. The son is deliberately unhelpful and discourteous. The discussion of studies based on Sinclair and Coulthard's model shows that it can allow flexibility to a great extent. It also gives us an idea that the model can be suitably modified to analyze other kinds of discourse. In the next module, we'll discuss how Sinclair and Coulthard's model can be modified to suit the analysis of drama also. Thank you.